Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm thrilled to share a powerful and inspiring story that showcases the incredible strength of a woman who defied expectations and turned betrayal into triumph. In this tale, we follow Hannah, a woman underestimated by her in-laws and husband, who spent years quietly building her empire. As the story unfolds, watch how her patience, intelligence, and determination lead her to the ultimate moment of reckoning. It's a tale of revenge, resilience, and the power of showing the world who you really are. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Hannah Morris sat in the cozy corner of her modest kitchen, a far cry from the opulence of the world her in-laws inhabited. As the scent of dinner filled the air, she couldn't help but overhear the conversation coming from the other room. Her mother-in-law, Helen, and sister-in-law, Sophia, were plotting what they thought would be the ultimate humiliation for her. They were going to invite her to an extravagant birthday dinner for her husband, Ethan, at the finest restaurant in town. And once the bill arrived, they would gently remind her that she couldn't afford it. Hannah, the waitress they loved to mock, had spent 5 years playing their game, pretending to be the humble, low-class wife who had married into wealth. They never questioned her true worth or abilities, dismissing her as nothing more than Ethan's wife, always comparing her to the socialite they had hoped he would marry. What they didn't know was that Hannah wasn't the woman they thought she was. Beneath the surface of the quiet, unassuming woman they mocked was a powerhouse. Hannah was the CEO of a flourishing international restaurant empire. Her success was built from the ground up, and she had kept it a secret, letting her in-laws believe they had the upper hand. As she listened to their cruel words, she realized that the time had come to reveal the truth. The dinner at the luxury restaurant, once seen as a moment of mockery, would become the stage for her long-awaited revelation. It was time for Hannah to take control and show her in-laws that the real power had always been in her hands. Hannah had always known that her in-laws looked down on her, but hearing their plans to humiliate her in such a deliberate way was a wake-up call. As she overheard the conversation from the kitchen, her blood boiled with a mix of anger and disbelief. The way Helen and Sophia spoke about her, mocking her background and assuming she would be embarrassed, made her feel both deeply betrayed and utterly underestimated. They were planning a cruel game, hoping to expose her low-class status in front of the entire family. It wasn't just a petty prank to them, it was their way of reminding her of her place in their world. They had been doing this for years, disregarding her accomplishments, belittling her efforts, and acting as though her achievements were nothing but a result of marrying Ethan. But this time, something felt different. This time, their manipulation would backfire. The conversation continued, with Martha suggesting that when the bill came at the luxurious Lamander restaurant, Hannah would be forced to face the reality of her supposed financial limitations. She'll probably try to pay with her waitress tips, Emma had gleefully added. That was the moment it clicked for Hannah. They had no idea who she truly was. Her heart rate quickened as the realization sank in. Everything they thought about her was based on assumptions, and they were about to be proven wrong in the most spectacular way. While they continued planning their cruel lesson, Hannah took a deep breath and reached for her phone. She texted Pierre, the executive chef at Lamander, to confirm the dinner arrangements. It was time to let her in-laws experience the truth in a way they would never forget. The fact that they had underestimated her for so long had only made her more determined to show them exactly what they had overlooked. As she quickly typed out a few more messages to her trusted team of executives, she felt a surge of satisfaction. The time for playing the humble wife was over. As the evening wore on, Hannah's mind raced with ideas for how to execute her plan. She had always been one to keep her cards close to her chest. And over the years, she had carefully documented every insult, every snide remark, and every manipulation. She had built her empire from scratch, quietly, strategically, and with purpose. The world, and most importantly her in-laws, had no idea how powerful she had become. They had always thought she was just a waitress, an easy target for their disdain. What they didn't know was that Hannah had been silently positioning herself as a force to be reckoned with in the business world. The discovery was more than just the unveiling of their plans, it was the turning point in Hannah's journey. The frustration she had bottled up for years, the way her in-laws had mocked her, All of it coalesced into a singular moment of clarity. They would not only face her success but would also have to reckon with the consequences of their actions. In that moment, Hannah made a vow to herself. The dinner would be her opportunity to claim what was hers. To teach them a lesson they would never forget. As the day of the dinner approached, Hannah began the meticulous process of orchestrating her revenge. She knew that the in-laws would expect her to be overwhelmed by the expense and grandeur of Lamander. But what they didn't know was that the restaurant wasn't just a place she worked, it was a key part of her carefully constructed empire. While they were busy planning to humiliate her, Hannah was busy ensuring their ultimate embarrassment. Every detail had been covered. Pierre, the executive chef, had confirmed the private dining room was ready, and Hannah had arranged a special menu, one that highlighted extravagant pricing, where every dish and wine pairing came with an eye-popping price tag. The goal was simple: to make them believe they were humiliating her, all the while ensuring they would be exposed for their arrogance and financial instability. She spent the next few days ensuring everything was in place. Her executive team had been briefed and instructed to prepare for a future where Maya Chen, CEO of the global restaurant empire, would step into her rightful role. In secret, Hannah had made calls to her financial advisors and secured documents that would reveal not only the truth about her empire but also the financial mess her in-laws had created. Helen's gambling debts were a ticking time bomb, and Sophia's addiction to credit cards was just as reckless. But it wasn't just about exposing their flaws, it was about showing them how thoroughly she had planned every move. And how, for years, she had allowed them to think they were the ones in control. As she continued to build her strategy, the tension in the house with Ethan grew. He remained blissfully unaware of the trap that was closing in around his family. Too blinded by his desire to please his mother and sister to see what was really happening. He was still fixated on the idea that their marriage was falling apart because of Hannah's supposed insecurity and her working too hard. As though the responsibility of their financial success rested solely on his shoulders. It wasn't that Ethan didn't love her, it was that he had failed to recognize her strength and ability to manage both their home and their empire. He had always been too weak to stand up to his family. Too passive to see through their manipulative games. The evening before the dinner, Hannah took time to prepare herself. Her appearance had always been scrutinized by the very people who didn't know her at all. She carefully selected a simple, elegant dress from her collection, knowing that it would give off just the right impression of understated elegance. She needed them to believe they were still looking at the same woman they had mocked, simple, humble, and unassuming. However, in the quiet of her study, she checked the latest financials of her restaurant empire. The company had just acquired another 50 locations, increasing its global footprint. Her worth had grown by several $1 million. Yet the family was still so consumed by their assumptions that they couldn't see the empire she'd built. Their treatment of her as the lowly wife only fueled her determination to prove them wrong. Later that evening, when she checked in with Pierre again, he confirmed that everything was set. They had even arranged a special touch, hidden cameras throughout the private dining room. The plan was to make sure every moment of her in-laws' reactions would be captured for posterity. Especially when the bill arrived. When Martha and Sophia saw the prices on the menu, they would no doubt gloat about how they had outsmarted her, thinking she would buckle under the weight of the cost. But the real twist would come when they realized the price wasn't the true cost of the evening. No, it was their own arrogance and lack of self-awareness that would be the price they'd have to pay. They'd finally be forced to confront their own financial mismanagement and see just how out of touch they were with the reality of the world Hannah had worked so hard to build. As the night drew closer, Hannah couldn't help but reflect on the years she'd spent hiding in the shadows, allowing her in-laws to think they had the upper hand. But that was all about to change. The manipulation that had been so carefully constructed in her family's attempt to humiliate her would now be their undoing. Hannah had always known how to play the long game. She had planned every move, documented every insult, and bided her time until the moment was just right. And now, as the dinner loomed, she could feel the anticipation building within her. This was no longer just about revenge, it was about taking back her life and showing them who she truly was. As the day of Richard's birthday dinner drew closer, The sense of anticipation and calm resolve in Hannah only intensified. She had spent the last few weeks preparing, making sure every detail of the evening would unfold perfectly. The restaurant, Lamander, would be the perfect stage for her long-awaited reveal, while her in-laws thought they were setting the stage for her humiliation. Hannah knew it was they who would be exposed. She spent the night before reviewing the menu and confirming that every dish, every bottle of wine, was carefully priced to make an impact. She also had Pierre, the chef, set up a surprise that would make the evening even more unforgettable. Her personal security team, whom she had kept on retainer for years, would be discreetly watching the entire dinner. Hidden cameras were strategically placed in the private dining room to ensure every moment of her in-laws' discomfort would be captured. As she looked over the final details of her plan, she felt a wave of satisfaction. This wasn't just about getting even, it was about taking back what was hers. About showing them how wrong they were to underestimate her for so long. The tension at home with Richard continued to simmer. Despite his efforts to remain neutral, his refusal to stand up to his family left him torn between two worlds. He still couldn't see the truth. Richard believed that by marrying him, Hannah had joined the wealthy world of privilege, assuming that her success was merely an extension of his. Even as she continued to build her empire, Richard remained blind to her accomplishments, reducing her success to a result of marrying up. He was too focused on keeping his family happy to truly see his wife for who she was. This ignorance only fueled Hannah's resolve. She spent her evenings on the phone with her lawyer, Marcus, finalizing the paperwork that would solidify her plan and ensuring her in-laws would be left speechless when the truth came to light. As the documents were prepared, she could almost feel the weight of their assumptions crumbling. In the days leading up to the dinner, Hannah's mind wandered back to the years she had spent quietly building her empire. From her first job as a waitress to the moment she started her own restaurant chain, every step had been carefully calculated. She knew how to manage a business, how to cater to clients, how to expand strategically, but most importantly, she knew how to bide her time. When Richard's family had treated her as nothing more than a naive young woman, she had quietly absorbed their insults, all the while working tirelessly behind the scenes. In the early days of their marriage, she had been determined to make Richard proud by staying humble. But it had become clear over time that her in-laws were not just critical, they were cruel. They mocked her background, her work ethic, and even the success of her growing restaurant empire. They had taken pleasure in belittling her, and she had quietly absorbed every insult, every remark. But now, as the plans for the dinner and the ultimate reveal fell into place, she realized that their cruelty had pushed her to this point. Richard's family, with all their condescension, had never understood the value of patience and preparation. They saw her as a simple waitress because they could not see the complexity of her life. The build-up to this moment was years in the making. And now, with everything in place, Hannah knew that tonight would be the night she would finally show them exactly who she was, and who they had failed to recognize. This dinner would not be just another reminder of her humble beginnings, it would be a demonstration of how far she had come and how little they truly understood about the woman they had so easily dismissed. The night would be her triumph, her statement of independence, and her final reckoning with the people who had underestimated her at every turn. The evening of Richard's birthday dinner arrived, and as Hannah entered the luxurious Lamander, she couldn't help but feel a surge of satisfaction. Her in-laws were already seated, their expressions a mix of false concern and barely concealed amusement. They thought they had set the perfect trap, an elaborate game meant to expose her as the unworthy wife. They had planned the night carefully, mocking her lowly background, assuming she wouldn't be able to handle the extravagant bill that would come with the dinner. They believed that her awkwardness would be their victory, but what they didn't know was that the tables were about to be turned. Martha, her mother-in-law, and Emma, her sister-in-law, greeted her with their signature condescending smiles. But Hannah remained poised, her expression neutral. They exchanged knowing glances as they made small talk, confident that their plan was going off without a hitch. Hannah sat down, calmly surveying them, and waited for the inevitable moment when they would ask for the bill. She could already feel the tension in the air, and as the first course was served, her in-laws' subtle taunts about the price of the dishes only served to fuel her resolve. They were already imagining her embarrassment. And it was almost too easy to play into their assumptions. Finally, the moment arrived. Jean, the maitre d', walked in holding the leather folder containing the bill. Martha's eyes gleamed with malicious satisfaction. And Emma, who had been waiting for this moment, looked ready to burst into laughter. But when Jean set the bill down in front of Martha and announced the astronomical total, their faces fell. It wasn't what they had expected. Instead of being humiliated, Hannah looked calm, almost detached as she signaled for the wine list to be brought over. Jean's gentle offer of a wine pairing menu, adding extra cost, was met with a quiet nod from Hannah. She made sure every expensive supplement was included, watching as her in-laws began to squirm, their smiles faltering. And then came the final twist. As the bill was being processed, Martha reached for her wallet, but the card was declined. Emma fumbled with hers, only to find the same result. Panic began to set in as they realized they were stuck with a bill they couldn't pay. Richard, always eager to please, started frantically checking his wallet, but he too was left short. At that moment, Hannah stood up, her presence commanding attention. She walked to the wine vault, entering her private code to unlock it. The tension was palpable as the door swung open, revealing her true identity, Maya Chen, CEO of the entire restaurant group that included Lamander. "I think it's time we had a proper introduction," Hannah said, her voice cool and measured. She removed her CEO badge from her purse and calmly informed them that the bill would be settled by her company. As the realization hit, the silence in the room was deafening. The smug smiles vanished, replaced by shock and disbelief, as the truth of Hannah's identity settled over the room like a heavy fog. Her in-laws were left reeling. Richard's face turned ashen, and Martha's previously confident demeanor crumbled into a panicked mess. Emma's eyes widened, her earlier smirk now replaced by a confused, stunned silence. Hannah, now standing tall with her CEO badge clearly displayed, calmly addressed the room. "I'm the one who owns this restaurant, along with every other in my portfolio. What you thought was a dinner for the lowly waitress is actually my domain. And the empire I've built from the ground up. The only thing low-class about tonight was the way you've treated me all these years." Richard, still reeling from the shock, stammered, "But, how could you? You've been so quiet, so invisible." His voice was shaky, a man unmasked by his own ignorance. He had never once truly questioned Hannah, had never realized the strength and ambition behind the woman he married. Hannah had spent years playing the role they wanted her to, keeping her true power hidden to protect the relationships that were important to her. But no more. Martha, meanwhile, had gone from denial to desperate pleading. "You're not serious, right? This is a joke, some kind of prank?" She tried to recover, but it was too late. Hannah nodded coolly, signaling for Jean to hand over the folders that contained the full evidence of her success and how she had quietly maneuvered around their assumptions. Jean distributed the documents, the folders thick with financial records, acquisitions, and contracts that spoke to the years of hard work Hannah had put in, work that had allowed her to not only build her empire but also protect herself from those who sought to tear her down. As Martha flipped through the papers, her face flushed with horror. The damning evidence was irrefutable. Hannah had kept track of every insult, every fraudulent scheme her in-laws had attempted. With each page, it became clear that everything they had done, mocking her, belittling her, assuming she was nothing more than the waitress, was part of a long history of arrogance that now had real consequences. "I've been documenting everything," Hannah continued, her voice calm and firm. "Your gambling debts, your credit card addictions, the way Richard's investments were failing and I had to cover for him. I let you all believe you were in control. But the truth is, I've been in control the entire time." Richard's heart sank further as the full weight of his mistakes came crashing down. "No," he whispered, almost pleading, "not like this. I didn't know. I didn't see." "Exactly," Hannah interrupted, her eyes hardening. "You never bothered to see. You've always let your family dictate our lives. And you let them destroy everything that could have been ours." The painful truth hung in the air as Richard and his family finally understood the depth of their miscalculations. As Martha's face turned pale and Emma's eyes filled with tears, Hannah took a deep breath and turned to Jean. "The bill for the evening. As you can see, is already settled, and now, I'm going to ensure that things are settled properly for good. Security was called to escort Martha, Emma, and Richard from the restaurant. Their humiliation now complete. The family that had once mocked her now had to face the reality of their financial mismanagement, their addiction to appearances, and their complete underestimation of the woman they had so cruelly belittled. As they were led out of the private dining room, Hannah remained seated, her posture regal and resolute. She watched them leave, feeling a quiet sense of triumph wash over her. The evening's revelation wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming the power she had always possessed but never used. The balance of power had shifted, and it was now her turn to rewrite her story. Afterward, as she prepared to leave Lamander, she received a message from her financial team confirming that Martha's debts had already been cleared and her own investments were continuing to grow. She had already planned for the next chapter, expanding her restaurant empire, growing her brand, and leaving behind the family that had never seen her for who she truly was. The success wasn't about proving them wrong, but about building something that would outlast them. As the door to Lamander swung open, Hannah stepped forward, leaving behind her past and embracing the future she had built, one dish at a time. As the dust settled and the events of that night faded into the past, Hannah sat quietly in her office, reflecting on everything that had transpired. She had always known the value of patience and preparation, but the depth of her triumph still amazed her. She hadn't built her empire overnight, nor had she ever sought to prove herself to anyone. Her success had always been about independence, about creating something of her own that would stand the test of time. In a way, she had been preparing for this moment her entire life. The years of subtle manipulation, the careful recording of every insult, every act of condescension, had all been part of a larger plan. Now, as she looked over the new financial reports and expansion plans, she realized the full scope of what she had achieved, not just in terms of her business empire, but in reclaiming her power and her self-worth. Her former in-laws, once so certain of their superiority, were now scattered, their lives in turmoil as the consequences of their actions came to light. Richard had lost not only his company, but his dignity, and his trust in his family. Martha and Emma, too, were now facing the fallout of their arrogance and manipulations. They had underestimated her for so long, assuming that because she came from humble beginnings, she could never rise above her station. But it was in their ignorance that Hannah had found her strength. The true victory, however, wasn't in seeing her in-laws crumble, it was in realizing that, despite their cruelty, she had always been capable of building something far greater than they could ever imagine. Sitting in the quiet of her office, Hannah realized that revenge had never been the driving force, it had been the desire to prove to herself that no matter the obstacles, no matter the disdain she faced, she could build her own future. Lamander and her empire were just the beginning. There was so much more to come. And this time, there would be no one left to underestimate her. The lesson from this story is about the power of patience, perseverance, and self-belief. Despite being underestimated and belittled by her in-laws, Hannah quietly built a successful empire over the years, using their mockery as fuel. The story teaches us that true strength lies in staying focused on our goals, building from the ground up, and trusting in our abilities, even when others don't. It shows that sometimes, the best way to prove yourself isn't through confrontation, but through thoughtful planning and letting success speak for itself when the time is right.